At the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet, my elder sister and I were endangered at the same time. In the end, I was saved by Xielian, while my sister was rescued by the heir apparent. The Empress Dowager immediately decreed our marriages. I married Xielian, my sister was matched with the heir. I thought that was a perfect ending. Years later, when my sister fell ill and died, Xielian, drunk, blurted out the truth, his eyes full of remorse. If you and your sister hadn't swapped clothes back then and I hadn't mistaken her for you, I wouldn't have saved you at the cost of missing the chance to save her. She wouldn't have been bound by reputation and married someone she didn't love, wasting half her life. After saying this, he drank the poisoned cup in front of my pregnant self. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the moment the warhorse charged. I shouted at Xielian, who was about to pounce on me, "Don't worry about me, my sister is drowning in the lake, go save her." As soon as the words left my mouth, Xielian froze, his eyelashes narrowing, his gaze lingering on my face for a moment. I knew he had recognized my face. It wasn't my sister's. In the previous life, my sister's dress had been soiled at the banquet, a petty matter, but she cared about appearances and was dismayed. I had switched dresses with her, and by chance it backfired, causing Xielian to mistake me for her and recklessly protect me. Now, with the horse charging and my ankle injured, there was nowhere to avoid it. Xielian's fingers tightened, his body moved slightly then halted. I saw it and slowly closed my eyes, a faint sense of relief curling at my lips. Fine. To die like this would be better than entangling with him for half a lifetime and torturing each other, but the expected pain never came. At the critical moment, a warm force pulled me into an embrace and rolled me aside. I smelled the familiar sandalwood scent. It was Xielian. The wind and hooves brushed my ears as he shielded my head, enclosing me in his arms to avoid danger. After several rolls we stopped by a column. The warhorse was subdued by the guards and the chaos subsided. I propped myself on Xielian's chest and rose. Dust smudged my forehead, and when I looked up I met his cold gaze. When Jingshu, in this life we owe each other nothing anymore. This time I saved you only because you are Chungyue's younger sister. Do not harbor unrealistic fantasies. With that he rose, brushed dust from his robe, and left without looking back. I watched his resolute back and only after a long while came back to myself. Xielian had been reborn too. Remembering his words that drew a boundary, I gave a bitter self-mockery smile. Enough. One dose of unrequited longing is enough in this life. Xielian did not injure his leg protecting me and saved my drowning sister before the heir could. When I rushed to the rear garden, I happened to see him remove his brocade cloak and gently wrap it around my sister's soaking body. "Are you still feeling unwell?" His tone was soft, his gaze cherished, a side of him I had never seen in my previous life. My sister's cheeks were slightly flushed as she shook her head, her features full of shy warmth. I stood not far away watching the scene by the lake, my chest slightly bitter yet inexplicably relieved. Without the past life's mishap, everything fell properly into place. My sister and Xielian were always meant to be this compatible sight. Before long, the Empress Dowager hurried over with her palace attendants. As in the previous life, she first comforted my sister and then planned to bestow a marriage. In this life my sister had been saved by Xielian, so the Empress Dowager naturally intended to grant them a marriage. Thinking this, I began to leave, dragging my swollen ankle. Just as I turned, the Empress Dowager's voice sounded. I just witnessed Xielian, disregarding his own safety, using his body to shield Jingshu from a horse that nearly trampled her. Such loyalty and bravery are rare. At today's birthday banquet, I decree that I will grant you a marriage right here. When her words fell, both Xielian and I were stunned. In this life, even though my sister was rescued by Xielian, the Empress Dowager still arranged a marriage between him and me. A hush fell, everyone's gaze settled on us. My sister clutched her cloak, looking at Xielian with anxious expression. In an instant, Xielian and I exchanged glances over the crowd, and the disgust in his eyes was almost palpable. After a long moment he slowly bowed, his voice a little hoarse, replying to the Empress Dowager, "I already have someone I love. I will not marry anyone else in this life. I beg your majesty to rescind the decree." The Empress Dowager frowned at his words. Seeing her anger, I instantly suppressed the refusal that rose to my lips. The Empress Dowager waved to dismiss everyone and kept only me, taking me back to Sinning Palace. The room smelled faintly of sandalwood, incense. With the outside clamor gone, the atmosphere grew even more somber. The Empress Dowager sat on the phoenix couch, her gaze heavy as she looked at me. "What are your thoughts on this marriage being granted?" I lowered my head, my fingertips clutching the hem of my dress, my heartbeat quickening slightly. "Your Majesty," the Empress Dowager, "this humble girl does not wish to marry Xie Lian." The Empress Dowager glanced at me with some surprise, perhaps seeing how nervous I was. Her tone softened a little. "Silly girl, you've hidden your feelings for Xie Lian for so many years, don't think you can fool me." I jerked my head up, my eyes burning slightly. No wonder the Empress Dowager still granted a marriage between me and Xie Lian in this lifetime. It turns out she had seen through my heart long ago and simply wanted to fulfill my wish. I truly have admired Xie Lian for many years. When I was young, I returned to my hometown with my grandmother and was waylaid by bandits. By chance I was saved by Xie Lian, who had come south to help with the floods. From then on, feelings of affection quietly took root in my heart, until my previous life. When he recklessly sheltered me beneath his horse's hooves, I was overjoyed and thought our feelings were mutual. Little did I know that from the very beginning it had been a misunderstanding caused by a series of unfortunate coincidences. Thinking of how, in the end, he would drink poison and look at me with eyes full of remorse, I pressed down the moisture in my eyes and spoke softly to the Empress Dowager. "I know your Majesty dotes on your servant and wishes to fulfill my feelings, but matters between a man and a woman require mutual affection. Xie Lian has never cared for me. I do not wish to force him. Nor do I want to marry someone who does not love me." The Empress Dowager looked at me with a trace of pity in her gaze, and some understanding as well. "Since your mind is made up, I will not force you. But now that you are of marriageable age, your lifelong matter cannot be delayed. You were not close to your mother since childhood and have often come to the palace to accompany me, so you are almost like a child who grew up by my side. I will personally find a suitable young man from a distinguished family for you. You will not be wronged." My eyes grew moist, and I solemnly bowed to the Empress Dowager. 5. I had just stepped out of the cinnabar doors of Sinning Palace when, before I could gather myself, a tall, upright figure blocked my path. Xie Lian's face was as dark as a mass of unmelting winter clouds. He strode forward without a word, his well-defined fingers suddenly clamping around my wrist. "What did you say to the Empress Dowager? Are you trying to make her, like in our past life, grant us a marriage?" Before I could open my mouth, his hard voice crashed down first, filled with undisguised disgust and impatience. "Don't think that just because I have a powerful Empress Dowager backing me, I will marry you. If I had known from the start that saving you in this lifetime would lead to you clinging to me so tightly, I would have stayed out of it and avoided this outcome. Even in this lifetime, my heart remains as still as dead water, unable to stir any waves in response to him, but his few words still stab at it. The decades-long bond of husband and wife in the past life evidently left in his heart only an aversion of "I can't get rid of you." My chest tightened all of a sudden. I forced down the surge of bitterness and said, "Young Master Xie, you needn't worry. In this life, we will have nothing to do with each other." Xie Lian froze for a moment, then looked at me as if he didn't believe a word, coldly tossing out, "Even if the Empress Dowager grants the match, I still won't marry you." 6. By the time I returned to the manor in my sedan chair, dusk was already drawing near. My mother, seeing me return, hurried forward and asked anxiously, "Has the Empress Dowager agreed to cancel your engagement to Xie Lian?" I lowered my eyes. Before I could speak, she suddenly stepped forward and gripped my arm. "Tell me quickly, do you know that since your sister came home she has locked herself in her room and refuses to see anyone?" She paused, her tone adding even more anxiety and helplessness. "Today by the lake she slipped and fell into the water, her clothes soaked through, and in front of everyone Xie Lian pulled her out. If she can't marry Xie Lian and word gets out, how can her reputation be preserved? Won't she be talked about for the rest of her life?" Beneath the hem of my skirt, the swollen ankle throbbed again with a dense, stabbing pain. I looked at my mother, whose eyes and heart were full of joie, and spoke softly, "Mother, today I was struck by a fierce horse at the banquet and nearly lost my life. Won't you ask me if I'm hurt?" My mother's hand suddenly stiffened. She hastily withdrew the hand that had been gripping my arm. The urgency on her face vanished in an instant, replaced by a flustered awkwardness. "Jingshu, are you all right?" I gently shook my head, and the light in my eyes dimmed. "I'm fine. The Empress Dowager has agreed to cancel the betrothal between me and Xielian." No sooner had the words left my mouth than the door to the west chamber beside me was suddenly pushed open. Elder sister stood at the door, her eyes brimming with joy. "Jingshu, is what you said true?" I looked at her and nodded. Xielian came to visit elder sister, bringing quite a lot of medicine for treating a chill. Even though elder sister said she was already fine, he still insisted on leaving those precious medicines behind. Everything was considerate, everything meticulous. My elder sister exclaimed to him excitedly, "Xielian, Jingshu just told me the Empress Dowager has agreed to cancel the arranged marriage." Xielian's fingertips, holding the teacup, paused abruptly. The tea inside rippled slightly, his eyes darkened, and his gaze went straight past my sister to fall on me, standing quietly beside them. After a long moment he withdrew his look and said to my sister with an unreadable expression, "Don't take her words too readily. This matter should be confirmed by me first." My sister glanced at me, her tone soft. "You wouldn't lie to me, sister." Before she finished, Xielian cut in, "You are just too naive." I kept my expression calm and treated his words as wind through the leaves. Our mother, meanwhile, was entirely focused on the delicate medicine bottles. She suddenly picked one up and said with slight surprise, "Why is there a jar of bruising ointment here?" She turned the bottle over and saw a clear palace seal stamped on the bottom, then looked at my sister. "This is from the palace, very rare. Cheongyu, where did you twist yourself?" My sister looked puzzled and shook her head. "Nowhere, I wasn't injured." Everyone instinctively looked to Xielian. His face changed slightly and he answered awkwardly, "Perhaps I grabbed the wrong bottle." My body tensed a little, and when I looked up I caught his dark eyes for a moment before hastily averting my gaze. His words sounded as if spoken to me, but even if he hadn't explained, I wouldn't have thought he had brought the ointment specifically for me. The Empress Dowager held a spring viewing banquet in the palace. Though it was presented as a spring outing to enjoy the flowers, its real purpose was to give the children of noble families a chance to meet one another. Xielian sat beside my sister. The two of them were intimate in speech and manner. Someone at the table teased, "Miss Wen and Mr. Xie seem so perfectly in tune. I've heard the two are soon to be joined. Truly a match made in heaven." Xielian's gaze reflexively passed over the guests and landed on me. Sitting not far away, my face remained placid, as if I hadn't heard a word. Halfway through the banquet, the Empress Dowager smiled and said, "On such a spring day, if we only have fine food and drink it's rather dull. Which young lady here would be willing to dance to enliven the occasion?" At her words many noble girls straightened in their seats, eager for the chance, but the Empress Dowager's eyes settled squarely on me. I recall that when I was skilled at dance as a child. "Today is an apt time, come out and perform a dance for us." No sooner had she spoken than Xielian snorted softly. The Empress Dowager does not know when is a reserved sort. Aside from reading and writing, she wouldn't engage in such lively, elegant things as dancing. Then he turned to my sister. "Cheongyu has practiced dance since childhood. Her movements are superb and praised throughout the capital. Have her perform. She will surely not disappoint the Empress Dowager." Since my sister began to study dance, I indeed danced far less. She was naturally beautiful, her features radiant. Wherever she stood, the room brightened. Standing beside her, I always appeared paler and more inconspicuous by comparison. When we were children and both wanted the same dance costume, even our mother would urge me to give it to my sister, saying such a pretty garment could only suit her. Gradually I came to believe that attention-seeking things like dancing were meant for people like her, so I instinctively shrank myself. If I stayed silent and unobtrusive, I wouldn't be compared to her. But now, living this life again, I suddenly don't want to keep mistreating this ordinary self of mine. In the end, I still danced before everyone. When the piece ended, the hall was first deathly silent, then erupted into cheers. My eldest sister's applause was the loudest. She smiled at Xielian beside her and said, "See, I told you, Jingshu's dancing is superior to mine. Right, I'm so glad she's willing to take up the talent she had as a child again." Xielian stared in my direction for a long time without speaking. His eyes flashed with deep astonishment and a briefly passing admiration. I was about to return to my seat when footsteps suddenly sounded in the hall, accompanied by the eunuch's hurried announcement. A moment later, a tall figure strode into the chamber. The newcomer wore a dark, patterned strong-stitched outfit, a jade belt at his waist, and a lithe bearing. Everyone turned to look, surprise in their eyes. "Isn't that General Shun of Ningyuan Marquisate? I heard he has been stationed at the border for years and seldom attends banquets in the capital. Why has he suddenly come to the Empress Dowager's spring-gazing banquet today?" The Empress Dowager, seated in the main place, also showed a hint of amusement in her eyes and called out, "Yang Ji, when did you enter the palace? Why didn't you have someone give prior notice?" Shen Yanji came into the hall and performed a composed bow to the Empress Dowager. After rising, those deep-set eyes fell directly upon me, meeting that exceedingly familiar yet aggressively intent gaze. My body stiffened for an instant and I hastily lowered my head. "Your Majesty, I only just entered the palace. I happened to hear the elegant music in the hall from afar and admired a breathtaking dance, praising it greatly in my heart. I feared disturbing the mood dutifully, so I waited outside for a moment before daring to enter." The Empress Dowager spoke with significance. "I see." I passed by the Imperial Canal outside and saw the spring scenery in full bloom, the peach blossoms at their height. The Empress Dowager wore an expression of regret. "It's a pity my body is old and I can't be bothered to stir about. Leave this beautiful sight to you young people to enjoy." I hunched inward, preparing once more to retreat from the table. Shen Yanji suddenly turned to me, lifting an eyebrow lightly. "Miss Wen, would you be willing to accompany me on a boat along the Imperial River, to enjoy the spring scenery together?" The moment he spoke, the table erupted into a commotion. My elder sister's eyes flashed with excitement as she leaned toward Xielian beside her. Could it be that this man has taken a fancy to our Jing Shu? To invite her so publicly, such a thing has never happened before. At those words Xielian's face went cold in an instant. He fixed his gaze on me, his tone carrying an odd certainty and hardness, and he almost reflexively blurted out, "When Jingshu would never agree." The next second, I spoke softly to Shen Yanji in front of me. "All right." Xielian at the seat was startled for a moment, then his face abruptly went pale. Shen Yanji and I had been on the pleasure boat less than half an hour when a palace eunuch hurried over, saying the emperor urgently summoned him and he must go immediately to pay respects. When he rose, his robe fluttered slightly. There was a trace of apology in his eyes as he looked at me, as if wanting to speak but stopping himself. I only shook my head gently and smiled at him warmly. "State affairs are important. You need not worry, Mr. Shen." As soon as I finished, he inclined his head slightly and hopped ashore on his toes, then followed the eunuch at a brisk pace, leaving only a boat of cool breeze and the river full of shimmering light. When the Imperial riverboat docked, I leaned on the rail for a while, but the dizziness still clung to my mind. I found an excuse and went alone to the Imperial garden to get some air. Just as I stepped through the moon gate, someone suddenly grabbed my wrist. Before I could react, I was pulled into a deep, shadowed corridor beside it. Xielian's figure blocked my path, and the air around him pressed down with frightening weight. He looked at me, and the irony and anger in his tone almost overflowed. "When Jingshu, in this lifetime, are you in such a hurry to marry yourself off to a man?" I lifted my eyes and gave him a cold glance. "Even if so, what does it have to do with young Master Xie? We have long ceased to be of any concern to each other. My affairs are none of young Master Xie's to comment on." He let out a low sneer upon hearing this. "The one you fancy, Shenyang Ji, is famous throughout the capital for countless liaisons. Who doesn't know that he is a willful, unruly lord who never lacks women by his side? Recently, the princess consort secretly hid from court and disguised herself, chased all the way to the frontier military camp, and barged into his camp to seek his wild doings. Everyone in the capital knows about it. He bent slightly forward, forcing me to raise my head to look at him. You wouldn't seriously think that a young, famed, untamed prodigy like him would truly fall for a girl like you, born into a common family, with looks and talents that are not outstanding. It's just a passing fling, nothing more. I mean well to remind you so you won't end up wasting your feelings on someone who toys with you, and then regret it. I struggled with all my strength to wrench his hand away, a well-meaning reminder. Xielian, what right do you have to say such things? Because my family is ordinary, my looks plain, you won't even spare me a single glance. Even though in my past life I treated you with the utmost sincerity, I tended to your meals and daily needs from dawn to dusk, stayed by your bedside when you were ill, bled for you emotionally, and yet you still think I, a person so ordinary, am unworthy of your devoted attention, refusing to cast me even a single proper look. Is that it? As soon as the words fell, the corridor instantly plunged into a deathly silence. The derision and viciousness on Xielian's face vanished. Abruptly, he froze, stunned, rooted to the spot. I shoved him aside and left without looking back. Ajia and Xielian's wedding was set for May. On the day she married, red candles burned high and the hall was full of brocade. Mother and I dressed her in the brilliant red wedding robe. As Mother smoothed the tassels at her temple, Ajia suddenly frowned, pressed her fingers to her temple, and swayed slightly as if struck by a sudden, violent headache. When she looked up again, her eyes were dazed and empty, completely devoid of the coyness of a bride. The next moment she suddenly raised her hand, tore the gold hairpin from her head, pearls and jewels scattered and clattered. I won't marry, I don't want to marry Xielian. Mother turned pale with fright and hurried forward to steady her. Chungyue, what nonsense are you talking about? Today is your wedding day. Ajia seemed not to hear, her gaze sweeping over me briefly, and in a hoarse voice she said to Mother, Mother, please step outside first, I have something to say to my second sister. When there were only the two of us left in the house, Sister suddenly grabbed my hand. Jingshu, I remember everything. I remember it all. The man I was meant to marry was the heir of Jing'an, wasn't he? The day I slipped and fell into the water, he was only one step too late to save me. Her eyes were red. Her tone was frantic and determined. The heir is still waiting for me. I can't marry Xielian. I can't marry him. A weight settled in my chest I hadn't expected Sister to recall. Her past life, hearing her so urgent and stubborn, clarity flashed through me. Her feelings for the heir of Jing'an in her previous life could not have been the indifferent, estranged thing Xielian described. Thinking that, a sharp wave of irony washed over me. I suppose Sister may have had a faint affection for Xielian in a past life, but after she was ordered to marry the heir of Jing'an, her heart was wholly bound to her husband, without the slightest distraction, let alone lingering feelings for him. Yet Xielian remained stubborn in his convictions, single-mindedly insisting that Sister's early death years ago was entirely because she couldn't let go of him. Her grief lodged in her heart. It was precisely because of this absurd obsession that he piled all his hatred and resentment onto me. Convinced that I had taken Sister's marriage and stood in the way of his longing, he never knew that, from beginning to end, it was only his one-sided illusion. 13 My thoughts settled, and I looked at Sister calmly. Sister, it's too late. You and Xielian have long since arranged the marriage, and today is your joyous day. If you refuse to marry now, it will only anger the Xie family and bring shame on the Wen family. Sister instantly panicked, tears streaming down her face, looking at me as if trapped with nowhere to turn, and blurted out, Jingshu, will you marry Xielian for me? After all, in your previous life you were the one who married him. I was not surprised by such a request from her. Throughout her life, everything she wanted came too easily, just a bit of coquettishness, and our parents, even I, would all indulge her in every way. I pulled my hand back, my tone growing colder. Sister, I cannot agree to this. From childhood until now, Mother and Father have lavished all their love on you. The things you refuse to do you always push on to me. Even if I like something you want, I won't compete with you. You have always been the one to reap the benefits, the one who enjoys everything without effort, but we are sisters born of the same mother, so I will not resent you for our parents' favoritism, nor will I dislike you for your indulgence. Still, sister, I was not born to always yield to you. I also want those pretty hairpins and pretty dresses, to be adored by our parents, and not to have to accommodate everyone at every turn. I paused, suppressing the sourness in my chest, and spoke each word earnestly. If today you truly do not want to marry, you can choose to run away from the wedding, but you cannot push me forward to bear all of this for you. My sister was stunned for a moment, her eyes full of shock and guilt. After a moment, she suddenly reached out and pulled me into her arms, choking up as she said, "Jingshu, it's my fault. All these years I knew you suffered many grievances, yet I took your yielding for granted and never stood up to speak a single word for you. Instead, you always yielded to me and protected me. I have wronged you." 14 In the end, my sister fled from her wedding on the very day of the ceremony. The whole Wen family immediately fell into chaos. My parents were both angry and anxious, resenting her for being so willful and reckless, but more than that they were worried sick, afraid she would get into trouble alone outside, and they kept ordering people to go look for her. In the chaos, Xie Lian and I met each other's gaze unexpectedly. He stood not far away, in a dazzling wedding robe, staring at me for a long time. After hearing the news that my sister had fled her marriage, Xie Lian's face showed a momentary shock, but surprisingly little sorrow. I quickly looked away, but I could still feel that intensely present gaze lingering on me for a long time. In my previous life, it was the same. After Xie Lian reluctantly came to the Wen family to fetch the bride, we became husband and wife. On our wedding night, we did not entwine like ordinary couples or exchange sweet words. Between us lay nothing but an unbreakable silence and distance. Back then, I thought it was nothing more than an ordinary start to the day, naively believing that as long as I did my utmost to treat him well from then on, our relationship would eventually improve. I never imagined that the loneliness of that day would be the reflection of my whole life. 15 Not long after my elder sister left home, a few days later, the southern borderlands fell into chaos. The Iron Cavalry of the Yi tribes launched a massive invasion, coming on with overwhelming force, and the court and the populace alike were thrown into an uproar. Skilled men and odd talents from the court were all dispatched to the front, and Xie Lian was among them. When the war reached its fever pitch, I decided to leave home. I packed a simple bundle and took my leave of my parents. No sooner had I spoken than my parents scolded me in rapid succession. The southern border is already in chaos, with refugees everywhere and the fires of war unceasing. You, a girl raised in the inner chambers, what are you trying to get into? You have always been dull-witted, not half as clever or quick as your elder sister. If real danger comes, you won't even be able to protect yourself. Wouldn't that be a needless death? In the past I would have bowed my head and endured such reproaches. But now I looked at them calmly and said, "Your daughter is not entirely useless. I am skilled in carpentry and can earn my keep with it. When I was young I trained with a martial instructor, enough to defend myself in ordinary situations. Moreover, while serving in the palace to attend the Empress Dowager, I was fortunate to study under the Grand Tutor of the current court. After years of study I am well versed in statecraft and strategy, not the dull and worthless person you describe. I used to learn these things to please you, to catch your eye for a moment, but now, I no longer do it for that." I clenched the hand hidden in my sleeve, looking at my parents' shocked faces, my voice steadying and steady. "I'm going to the southern frontier, not for anyone else, but for myself. I simply don't want to spend my life like this." On the day I left, my parents saw me off at the city gate, their eyes bloodshot. They seemed to age many years in an instant. Mother leaned against father's chest, gazing at the days of unbroken rain, her voice heavy with sorrow that wouldn't lift. "Have we made too many mistakes?" 16 After a long, winding journey, I finally reached the southern front. I heard that Fuan camp was recruiting carpenters to repair armories and tents. Relying on my carpentry skills and literacy, I joined smoothly and was assigned to the Armory Repairs Division. I was squatting in the camp repairing the wooden frame when a familiar figure suddenly approached. Xie Lian stood before me in dust-streaked armor, looking at me with utter astonishment. The next second he strode forward, seized my wrist, his voice laced with his usual arrogance and severity. "What are you doing here? Do you know This is a battlefield of blades and swords, not your boudoir where you write poems and tend flowers. If you stay here you'll only cause trouble. I'll have someone send you back to the capital right now." I lifted my eyes coldly and was about to pull away when a shout came from not far off. "Carpenter, when? The ladder beam for the siege engine has broken over here. We need to reinforce it urgently. Please come over and handle the incline." Xielian froze and murmured, "Since when, did you know?" "Carpentry." He stared at the incline and plane in my hand, his eyes full of astonishment. I ignored it, snatched my hand back, brushed the sawdust off my sleeve, and turned to stride quickly toward the direction of the call. 17 in December, winter wrapped the southern border in dense smoke and pushed in. The war at last reached a decisive stage. The Yi forces, relying on the terrain, stubbornly defended the lone city, and the supplies sent to aid them were dwindling, yet Xielian's troops found it hard to breach the walls. He sat in the commander's tent, worried and frowning after days of planning deployments. Late at night I was ordered to bring Xielian a warming soup. When I entered the tent, he stood by the desk with his back to me, holding a stack of yellowed letters in his hand, seemingly lost in thought and utterly unaware anyone had come in. I called his name a few times with no response, and so I planned to set the soup down and withdraw just as the steaming bowl was about to be placed on the desk. Xielian suddenly turned and collided with me. With a clatter, most of the hot soup splashed out, soaking that stack of letters through. Xielian's face turned ashen in an instant. Forgetting about the scald, he hurriedly bent over to snatch the papers, rubbing the wet sheets hard with his fingertips, making an even bigger mess. He straightened up abruptly. When he looked at me, his eyes were full of wrath and impatience as he snapped, "Wen Jingshu, why are you always so clumsy? You can't even hand something over properly." I was angry in my heart, but remembering that it was I who had ruined the letters, I was about to apologize. My gaze unintentionally swept across the papers that had been rescued. The soaked page bore handwriting I knew all too well. The signature at the end read Chen Bai, the pen name I had once used. Xielian was still vexed, his voice hoarse and irritable. "The current war is shrouded in mysteries. If Mr. Chen Bai were here, he would surely help me shoulder the burden and break the deadlock. It's a pity I can no longer contact him." I was startled, and memories from my past life surged like a tide. Since childhood I had been keen on military strategy and political affairs, and after the Grand Tutor's guidance I showed considerable talent. In my early years I happened to be friendly with someone I had never met in person, and we often exchanged letters discussing the state of the world. After marrying into the Xie household and living secluded in the inner quarters, our correspondence ceased. Later I discovered that that friend was actually Xielian. Seeing him tormented and sleepless over the war, I took the pen name Chen Bai, hid my identity, resumed writing to him, and quietly analyzed the situation and offered my humble opinions. 18 I had just stepped out of the commander's tent and had not yet melted into the night when I ran into a tall figure. Shenyang stood in silver armor frosted as if with snow, stationed outside the tent in the wind and snow. When he saw me emerge, his eyes brightened sharply and he strode forward. "Stop right there." Xielian had somehow caught up and was blocking between Shenyanji and me. The hostility in his military attire was almost tangible. He stared at Shenyanji with an expression cold as ice. "A great battle is imminent. The border is under strain. General Shen, you abandon your command area and leave your post to come to my frontline camp. Of course I came to get help." "Help," Xielian sneered. "Does General Shen intend to seek guidance from a mere sheltered girl who follows the army in my tent? What a ludicrous notion." Shenyanji, upon hearing this, cast me a meaningful glance. "General Xie mistakes a pearl for a pebble. She is no ordinary sheltered girl." Seizing the moment Xielian faltered, he reached out with long arms and pulled me to his side, holding me protectively in his embrace. Xielian's pupils contracted. With lightning reflexes he grabbed my other wrist, his grip painfully strong. He fixed me with a hard stare, his voice strained. "Wen Jingshu, are you really going to go with him?" I gave a slight tug at my wrist, my tone so calm it bordered on indifferent. Anyway, in General Xie's eyes, I was always a hindrance. Staying here would only make things worse. Xielian's face went ashen with rage, his voice thick with threat. If you really go off with him today, don't ever expect me to look at you again, not even once." I nodded lightly, pulled my hand back, didn't look at him again, and turned back into the tent to pack. When I finished packing and stepped out, I had only taken a couple of steps when hurried footsteps came from behind. Someone's shoulder slammed into me. I staggered, and the wooden box in my arms hit the ground with a slap. The lid popped open, and the letters and the simple tactical sketches I usually drew scattered everywhere. When Shenyenji saw this, he immediately bent down to pick them up. Xie Lian, however, suddenly leaned forward and snatched the letters first. After reading them, the hand holding the paper trembled slightly. His eyes opened wide. "Aren't these the letters I wrote to Mr. Chen Bai? How did they end up with you?" He suddenly looked up at me, as if realizing something, his face turning pale. "Could it be that you are 19? The battle in the southern border lasted half a year. When the smoke cleared, victory songs rang out. The lost homeland had been fully recovered. The remaining bands of the Yi people were routed and driven back 100 li. Never again daring to invade that night. As darkness fell, the main hall lit up with bonfires that rose into the sky. I stood quietly outside the crowd watching the lively scene. Beside me, Shen Yang wore silver armor, had sheathed his sword, casually took a cup of wine, and looked at me with gentle eyes. The night wind stirred. Voices hummed. I suddenly spoke. "General Shen, when did you realize I was Mr. Chen Bai?" Shen Yang turned his head, a knowing smile in his eyes. "The Grand Tutor is my maternal uncle. I often visited his residence. Each time I heard him exclaim that Miss Wen of the second household is extraordinarily gifted. Her achievements in military strategy far surpass her peers, even exceeding mine. I was unconvinced who in the world could know the art of battlefield slaughter like that of a woman, until the day you casually said a few words and solved for me a tactical problem I had been puzzling over for days. At that moment I was certain that only you could possess such insight. Later I watched secretly and found you occasionally published opinions in secret collections under the name Chen Bai. The tone and manner in those lines matched your speech that day." He paused, his gaze falling heavily on my face. I had thought such an extraordinary woman ought to be like a spirited steed, free and unrestrained, galloping across the world. But the more I saw you, the more I found you had never truly been yourself. You are always cautious, hiding your talents. Behind you, I felt a slight wistfulness, then showed a relieved smile. "I won't anymore." The southern border was reclaimed, the great achievement complete. When the emperor heard that I had offered the crucial strategy and that my contribution was indispensable, he was greatly pleased and repeatedly praised. "Wen's Jing Shu surpasses men, truly an outstanding woman." He immediately issued an edict, specially conferring the title of County Lady Minghui upon me, bestowing glory upon me and attracting the world's attention. On the day of the investiture ceremony, ritual music played and fragrances lingered among the crowd. Dressed in splendid robes, I calmly received the title. After the rites, Xie Lian quietly sought me out in a secluded spot and stepped in front of me. He looked at me, his eyes full of belated guilt and sorrow. "Jing Shu, it was my past foolishness. I failed to recognize a bright pearl, mistaking beautiful jade for a rough stone, treating you with contempt and betraying you in every way. I know I was wrong. Could you give me another chance?" I looked at him calmly, without the slightest ripple in my heart, and merely shook my head. "No need. Since things have come to this, we owe each other nothing. Let's part here," turning and leaving. The sunlight was just right and the spring breeze brushed my face. In the blink of an eye it was spring again. Along the Imperial River the willows were green and the flowers were in full bloom, the scene unchanged. From that year Shen Yanji walked slowly to my side, a smile in his voice. When we walked along the Imperial River back then, we were interrupted by an urgent matter halfway through and couldn't enjoy it fully. I have been brooding over it ever since. The boat is ready for tomorrow. Would the county princess do me the honor of accompanying me for another outing? I lifted my gaze to him, the corners of my lips curving into a faint smile. That depends on my mood. If tomorrow is